It's just dripping a little bit. There's one. I'm making syrup. It's sugaring season 2013 here in Michigan, and it's the middle of March, and that's about a normal time of year. This is a big sugar maple tree. That's where the sap comes from. And this is a more modern sap bag. It's not the traditional bucket. It's empty because we've just gathered the sap. But they work okay. And the sap runs when it runs during the daytime when it thaws, but it has to freeze the night before. So the sugaring season starts when it starts thawing in the daytime, but it still freezes at night. If it stays frozen during the day, then you don't have sap. And once it starts thawing at night as well as in the day, you don't have sap either. And it didn't really freeze last night, so that's why there's not much sap today. And so anyway, this is the sugar house. This is at the farm where I work. But I also help at another sugar bush on the other side of town. This is a small one here. And this is the heart of the operation right here. This is a maple syrup evaporator. We've got sap in that tank up there. We pump it up there, and it gravity feeds down into a float box. And it's kind of like the float on a toilet tank. These pans are filled inside. Let me open this one up. Maybe you can see in there. Well, maybe not. It's pretty dark. There's sap in this float box here, about to there. You'll see there's a pipe that takes it into the pan, the flue pan back there. And so that's the height that the sap is at in this pan, in both of the pans really. So it goes into this back pan. This back pan has a bunch of deep fins in it, kind of like a radiator. We call it a flue pan. And that's where most of the boiling happens. That's where most of the water gets boiled out, about 75% of the water. And it comes through this pipe into the syrup pan. And the syrup pan is kind of divided into three sections. It kind of meanders through, comes around, and this is the end of the line for the syrup flow through the evaporator. And this is where we would draw off syrup when it's to syrup. And it's heated with a wood fire. Come on. Very hot. So basically we boil. It takes a lot of boiling, and you'll notice this thermometer here. I want to show you this. This is a special thermometer. It starts at 0, goes up to 50. It's marked at 7 right there. 0 on this thermometer is 212 degrees. That's the boiling point of water. Now, when you first start this out, you get sap in here. The sap is mostly water, and it will boil pretty much at 212 degrees. And so it's not possible really to get it hotter than that for the time being. But as you boil it, the more water you boil out of it, the boiling point goes up. And so the thicker it gets, the temperature will go up slowly. And when the temperature goes up to 7 degrees above boiling point of water, then it's syrup. And when it gets to about that point, we'll use a hydrometer. This is a little test tube here. It's a little cup. You got this thing called a hydrometer, and we'll fill this up with the syrup when we think it's just about ready. Put this in it, and this will float when the syrup gets thick enough. And you can see there's a red line here. If the syrup isn't done, then this thing will float low. The red line will be below the top of the cup. When it's syrup, that red line will float right at the syrup level. And if it's too heavy, if you boiled it too much, it'll even be above it. So this is the final test to decide when it's syrup. That line should be right at the syrup level. And then we'll draw the syrup out and keep testing it until it's light, too light, and then shut the valve off and wait to get another batch. And that's how we get syrup. And we put it in these fancy maple leaf bottles like this one here. Now that's the process kind of simplified. The way they actually do it here, it's not the way I'm used to at the other sugar bush that I work at. What they'll do here is they'll cook it in the evaporator until it's close to syrup, but not to syrup, because you can cook it to syrup in the evaporator, but you run the risk of getting it too heavy, and you can't just shut this fire off. So we'll just cook it until it's almost done in the evaporator, and then we use a gas finisher. That's just, you know, a tank with a gas burner under it, a valve, and a thermometer, and we do the same thing in there. We boil it until it gets to 7. We test it with the hydrometer, and when it is ready, we can shut the gas right off, and then we know it's not gonna get too heavy. And then from there, you got syrup. You got to filter it, because when you boil sap, it actually makes what we call sugar sand, and it's kind of like mud that accumulates in the syrup, and we got to filter that out before we boil it, or excuse me, before we bottle it. And actually, I do have some syrup in my truck. I'll go get it. Hold on a sec. There we go. This is some syrup I made last year out at the other sugar bush that I work at. By the way, a sugar bush is a place where you make maple syrup. And that's pretty stuff there. See how light that is? It's almost like honey. That's grade A light amber. It's as light as you can get it, and generally the lighter you can get it, the better it is. And I didn't really grow up on maple syrup until I started making it about 4 years ago, and I can never go back to anything now. But the maple syrup, real maple syrup I had had before, usually came out of a bottle that had been sitting in the fridge for about a year or two, and it never tasted that great. But I'll tell you, if you taste some fresh maple syrup that looks like this, that you know is not a year old, I mean, actually this is a year old and it tastes pretty good, but if it's like this, it ought to be pretty good stuff. I can't imagine Can't imagine anybody not liking it, but that's just me. And there's other things you can do with it too. You can, and I've never really done it, you can heat it up even more. You can boil the syrup down even more and actually make hard candy, like maple sugar candy out of it. And you can also make granulated maple sugar. I've had that before. That's really good. I've taken that camping, backpacking kind of as a substitute for syrup on pancakes. It's really good. But anyway, yeah, I'll have to show you the other sugar bush that I work at, because they've got a much bigger operation than this. So, pretty cool. And I'll see you next time.